Bit me to the seats. I got now they say your pass the number for the pocket. Yeah.
No.
For the pocket. No, this was in your phone.
Good evening, everyone.
Then you send it.
My name is Anita Palmer. I'm the Associate Professor of African Studies, and I serve as Executive Director at the Center for Women, Gender, and Global Leadership. So welcome. I want to start by saying welcome to our students and faculty, and to Mr. Bobi Wine. Welcome back to NACA. We hosted Bobi Wine on April 27, 2023. Then he came and shared with us at actual cost of resistance. He came bearing the marks of state violence against him, against his family, against everyone around him who dared to imagine a different future for Uganda. At that time, he shared with us his struggles and those of tens of millions of Ugandans. But what struck me was the power, determination, and focus that he had. Despite everything happening, he came to Howard anyway. He came to talk. He came to listen. He came to engage with our students, especially thinking through, among other things, what Pan-Africanism means in moments of intense crisis. Bobi Wine's struggle isn't just about elections or parties or who holds office. It's a fundamental question about what governments are for and what do they owe the people they govern, especially those marginalized, especially the young. The Ugandan state's response to Bobi Wine, the imprisonment, the torture, the targeting of his wife and children, is a violent statement. And Bobi Wine's persistence, his refusal to disappear, is a counterstatement. It says to Uganda, to Africa, and the rest of the world that radical reimagination of our institutions is imperative. Many of you have probably seen Bobi Wine, the People's President. It's the Oscar-nominated Peabody Award-winning film that documented his movement. That film did something crucial for global consciousness. It refused to let the world see Uganda's politics as a settled question. It reframed African politics as a foregone conclusion, with people merely existing as the victims. It made visible the complexity and legitimacy of a youth-led movement demanding democratic voice, freedom, dignity, and the right to prosper. I'm very much looking forward to the discussion. I hope we gain a better understanding of the situation in Uganda, especially over the past 6 months, and of course, to discuss what better alternatives look like. On behalf of the Department of African Studies, we welcome you African Studies Graduate Student Association, Miranda Rivers, Innocent Ekajioba, and last but not least, Abacho Hanjula. Thank you for organizing this. I want to extend special gratitude to Mr. Milton Alamadi of the Black Star News for reconnecting us. Without further delay, I present Mr. Bobi Wine and Mr. Milton Alamadi. Thank you.
Your home was raided by the military. Your wife, Barbara, assaulted. Many of your supporters didn't know what had happened to you. It took almost 2 months before people realized you were still alive. Would you like to talk a little bit about that as an introduction before I get into the specific questions? Because sometimes we tend to forget that you have a family. We're talking about human beings here. We're not just talking about who wants to become the leader we are. So talk a little bit about that on a personal family note, about that experience. And in as much as you can say how you managed to get out of Uganda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greetings, sisters and brothers. I'm very honored to be with you today. My real name is Tabulani Sentamu, although I'm known by my musical stage name, Bobi Wine. On January 15th, we had an election, a presidential election, and that was the second time I was running for president. I first ran for president in Uganda in 2021. That story is all summarized in a Netflix documentary, in a Nat Geo documentary that is on Hulu called Bobi Wine, the People's President. It was a long, sad, miserable story. But in January this year, I ran for president. We held the polls on 15th, and immediately my wife and I had cast our ballot, who was surrounded by the military and police and authorities. The following day, on the 16th, we were raided, but I escaped from home because I had learned earlier that there was an order to harm me fundamentally, an order issued by the Chief of Defense Forces, the head of the Uganda military, who is also the son of General Museveni, the President of Uganda now. I remained in hiding for over a week, and on the 23rd of January, once again, my house was raided, my wife assaulted, family members assaulted, and my wife ended up in hospital. Luckily enough, she used her smarts and escaped from her hospital bed and was able to make it out of the country with our children. I remained in the country for the next close to 2 months until I was able to still make it out of the country and be here. Now, why did I escape from my country? There were orders, not private orders, but these orders were all even tweeted by General Museveni, who is the head of the Ugandan military and the son of the current president, who issued an order that I should be delivered to him dead or alive. He followed it up with another order that I should be found by the military and castrated. Now these are still on Twitter as we speak right now. Of course, this follows the constant bragging. He is also quoted having tweeted that he had killed 23 of my friends, and these are not numbers, these are real people. And he was hoping that I'm the 24th person he gets unkilled. This is a person that has abducted my friends, including my personal bodyguard, tortured him, not in silence, but live on social media, shared him here and here, and then tweeted the naked pictures of him. This is the same person that raided the home of my personal political assistant, expecting to get me there. They thought that is where I was hiding. They didn't get me, and they abducted the wife of my personal assistant, held her in military barracks for 37 days. In those 37 days, so much nasty things happened to her, but among which she told us that they even removed her contraception, the IUD, from her. Now these and many other abuses are done especially to women. Knowing that was the case, I knew what would befall me if I fell in their hands. That's how I ended up here. Now many people, especially back home, especially those that are in support of the regime but are trading under a Pan-African banner, were criticizing me of ending up in America and not in another African country like Kenya, Uganda, Tanzania, Rwanda, and all these others. But we all know that the dictatorships back home are intertwined and look up to one another. We have a very known political icon called Dr. Kizza Besigye, who was the main opposition leader for so many years before I showed up. He was abducted in Kenya by Ugandan security, driven across the border in a car trunk, and right now in prison in Uganda, having been presented in a kangaroo military court. Many other citizens have been abducted either from Tanzania or from Kenya and other countries. That is how I ended up here. I'm not here to seek pity. I'm here to seek solidarity with Africans and citizens of the world, because I know that time immemorial, the liberation of oppressed places has been successful with the help of their diasporas. That's why I'm here. I could go on and on and on, but I hope that's introductory enough.
Thank you for that. All right, so let's stick with the theme of the military for now. And when people think of elections, you have to really put it in the context of Uganda. Describe what is referred to even by national media as an election in Uganda, when in fact when you're campaigning, there were certain places you could not have access because and people want you to stream live. You were blocked by the military, you were blocked by the police, there were no-go zones declared for you, and your convoy was being fired on with live bullets, and some of your aides were actually struck with live bullets. And yet, people still showed up to the campaign rallies. Could you try to explain that? Why are people willing to take that risk to come to your campaign rallies, even though they know that there's a very high likelihood of violence being led out by the armed forces and the police?
Thank you. What keeps bringing the people to listen to the message of change is hope. It is only hope, the stubborn hope that drives the people. What keeps us going is the desire to keep that hope alive. We said it many times that Uganda is the second youngest country in the world. We are young, we are broke, we are hungry and angry. We could pick guns and remove that government, that oppressive regime. But we know history has shown us that violence has not produced peace, it produces more violence. And we also know that it's painful, but non-violence is stronger than violence. That's why we stuck to non-violence. So we went into this campaign like we did the other time, well knowing the kind of regime that we were facing, but it was the only window for us to connect with the people, to interact with the people, and to awaken and arouse them, and we achieved that. Yeah.
Okay, so now the next question is the role of outside countries. And the question is, how do international actors, whether it's governments, China, or multilateral institutions, and of course that includes the World Bank and IMF, how do they shape the political outcomes in Uganda? And how should African leaders navigate these influences while maintaining sovereignty? Well, in the case of Uganda, it's a bit different because he's maintained his sovereignty for the last 40 years now. So if you could talk about that in Uganda's case, but generally in African countries as well.
Thank you very much. Sovereignty has a completely different meaning back home. Just like elections, just like democracy. I mean, these are words that are used and thrown around whenever desired by the authoritarian leaders back home. In the context of Uganda, much as we got independence 63 years ago, in 1962, I don't look at us as the citizens independent. The regime in Uganda for over a decade has been receiving up to $1 billion every year from the United States, let alone what comes from Europe and other countries. But this has been a transaction not between the people of Uganda and the development partners, but between General Museveni and the development partners. It's unfortunate, and this we've been reiterating it, that we are oppressed not because we are weak as the people of Uganda. Africans are oppressed by dictators not because they're weak, but because those dictators have a wind in their wing, and that wind are the so-called development partners. Allow me to call them oppression partners. Why? Because these are democracies, and if they wanted us to have democracy, we would get it. I'll take you a little bit back. Idi Amin was supported by the British until they had had enough of him and others. The apartheid regime was supported by the West until they had had enough of him. I am very sure that if America or Europe did not agree with the oppression of the people of Uganda, they would stop it by disassociating with it. The regime in Uganda and many other authoritarian regimes in Africa have their bloodline, have their support, have their survival tied to the developed world. While elections are being rigged, all we get are statements and not action. On 18th and 19th November 2020, hundreds of people were massacred on the street in Uganda. Yes, we got some statements of condemnation, but we did not see any sanctions being slapped on those people that killed Ugandans in cold blood, and that continues again and again and again. So, yeah, the dictators are there, but they get their survival from the foreign partners. Today, Museveni is in business with China, and because of that, the biggest survival source, which is Lake Naroba, they call it Lake Victoria, is out of balance for the local fishing communities. Why? Because the Chinese are using it. The foreigners, for as long as they are white or have white skins in Uganda, are much more regarded than the citizens. It can go on and on and on and on. Much of the reason why we come to the developed world is to call them out. We know that apartheid thrived until a documentary was shown here in America against apartheid, and until there were widespread protests of Africans and friends of Africa condemning apartheid, that apartheid was defeated and brought down. So we come here not because people back home are not church. When you look at the campaign, the masses, young, old, male, female, educated, uneducated, rural, urban, all turned up to show their desire for change. But the dictator was able to subdue them by killing them, by abducting them, by raping women and men to cow them down. And yes, that succeeds because the Western world closes their eyes. That's why we come to spaces like this, well knowing that a student of Howard University might be a singular student, but you agree with me that you, especially who come from Africa, are so followed and so honored and so respected. To raise this voice, maybe this voice will be echoed by you and get our friends, the American population, and those that you can reach out to ensure that they are provoked, at least their conscience is provoked to change the narrative back home. Thank you.
All right, so I want to answer a question about the youth movement and how we galvanize the youth in Uganda. Uganda is one of the youngest countries in the world. 80% of the population is under the age of 35. But before you respond to that question, and the importance of the youth movement in Africa, we've seen some changes in countries like Senegal because of what the youth have been able to do by coming out to the streets. So I want you to address that, but before that, I want to turn on to what you said in your last remark in terms of how the global community was galvanized to fight apartheid in South Africa. And I've always thought about this. Do you think it was much easier to get a global movement against apartheid than to try to galvanize a global movement to go after an African government which actually have repressive policies that are comparable to the apartheid regime? Maybe speak on that and then segue to the youth.
Thank you. Why was it easier to get the global movement against apartheid up and running than now? I wouldn't be very quick to say it was easier because Mandela was in prison for 27 years. And even before then, there was oppression. In fact, I believe it took longer. Why? Because the oppressors there, maybe because they were fighting. But again, I'll tell you that the challenge that I see is that back home we seem to be quick to condemn an oppression by foreigners and to close an eye to oppression by our own kith and kin. Oppression is wrong, whether by white people or by black people. Now, oppression during apartheid, during colonialism, brought us all together because we were oppressed as Africans in our own land. Unfortunately, majority of our liberators turned into oppressors. There's one song that I sang and said, see our leaders become misleaders and see our mentors become tormentors. And that's exactly what it became. When you look back, most of the oppressors, most of the dictators were once freedom fighters. I was named after Robert Mugabe. My name is Robert. And my parents gave me that name because in 1982, Robert Mugabe was a prized revolutionary. And we had so much hope in him because he was speaking so highly, he was giving so much hope. Bobi himself, the ruler of Uganda, he used to speak the way he speak, only more eloquent when he was much younger. But unfortunately, as time went on, power corrupted them. And again, even more unfortunately, they found justification for that oppression, that anybody, especially the young people that rise to the occasion and say, we are the future and we want the opportunity to determine our own future, they are quick to brand the agents of the West. That is an unfortunate bit, and that is why it has become so hard for us to fight, to free ourselves, to be able to determine our own destiny, because there is always that narrative of the past. You talked about the youth movement or the youth search under We appreciate that, and it inspires us from South Africa to Zimbabwe to Uganda and now to Senegal. I was in Senegal when Sonko was in prison, when the then president was trying to change the constitution so he could run again and again and again. But it took the steadfastness and strength of the people of Senegal to resist that. And that is how the new generation rose to the occasion. I'm just glad that the new leadership, the young leadership of Senegal was raised by the people, was mandated by the people, so they must be in many ways answerable to the people. Thank you.
So sticking with that same point of this meeting, a young Senegalese student actually posed that same question to me. And she said, why is it that in Uganda, the youth in Uganda are not able to duplicate what the young people were able to accomplish in Senegal? You explain that? And I think that ties into the tail end of the question that I posed. To what extent can youth-led political movements in Africa transition from protest mobilization to institutional political power?
Thank you. I'll say the young people in Uganda or anywhere in Africa are not just weak. They're doing all they're doing. They're doing all they can. Unfortunately, they are up against immeasurable force. I'll give an example of the youth movement in Tanzania that tried just last year to fight for their democracy. Reports show us that up to 10,000 young people were massacred on the streets, and there has not been any accountability. In Uganda, the movement that I lead, we have thousands, up to 3,000 of our comrades in prison for daring to raise their fist up and say they want freedom. You've seen that in many other countries, in Cameroon, even in Kenya where there was a Gen Z protest and all that. So the young people of Africa are rising to the occasion. It hurts me to say that I still strongly believe in nonviolence, although nonviolence seems to delay. But these young people, we, those that are leading them, are struggling to discourage them from violence because we see the kind of leader that violence has brought to us. What was achieved in Senegal, I believe, can and will be achieved in Uganda, in Kenya, in Tanzania, and many other countries. But again, why do we, one would be quick to ask, why did you come to America? We come to America because while we fight for freedom back in Uganda, and while we use the truth and words as our weapon, we cannot fight against $1 billion. We cannot fight against American trained commandos that are staged as snipers to shoot down any young man or young woman that is seen on the street protesting with placards and banners and leading their friends. We cannot fight against the heroes that come from Europe. So, what we come to tell these administrations here, these Western capitals, is that we're not asking you to save us, just stop funding, stop sponsoring our operation, stop arming them, stop obstructing our moral fight for the values that you taught us, for the values that you profess every day: democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights.
Maybe I'll pose 2 more questions and I'll open it up to Q&A. On the issue of Pan-Africanism, do you see meaningful prospects for stronger regional or continental solidarity among opposition movements in Africa, or are these struggles still largely confined within national political systems?
I really struggle to speak from the point of view of an opposition leader, or even from the politician. I hesitate to refer to myself as a politician. I did not get into politics because I wanted it. No. It was desperation. It was lack of an option. I'm not the most qualified.
Could you talk a little bit more about that for people that are not familiar? Why did you say, I have no choice but to try and get politics?
Well, thank you. I'm a musician, guys. You will not find a politician called Bobi when that's a musical name. In fact, a few years ago, I had my long breakbooks that I painfully had to let go in order to fit in that image of the person running for president. But I don't even used to dress like this. I'm a musician. I was a musician. That is concerned. But before then, as you know, stars are so sought after. And in a country like Uganda, the powerful and mighty love to associate with stars. So I was friends with all these military generals and all these powerful people. And it was alright. I was not affected by the oppression because I was rich, I was popular, and everything. It's just this one day when I was walking out of a nightclub with my Cadillac Escalade with 24 spinning wheels, when I was attacked by a young man, my age, but he was a security operative, and he slapped the hell out of me. What was my crime? Showing off. He asked me why I'm showing off. Don't you know this country has owners? Well, that was because all the girls were looking at me and I was the good of the night. That for me was a wake-up slap. It reminded me that regardless of my stardom and my musical success and my wealth, I was not safe in a country where there's no justice. And since then, I started changing my music from entertainment to edutainment and sang about the rights of the people and the oppression. And it took me a whole 10 years from when I was 25 until when I was 35. I realized that much as I was communicating, still nothing could change until I went to the platform where these words matter. And therefore, 10 years later, in 2017, I ran for MP because I wanted to go to Parliament and speak these words. So when I went to Parliament, in that election, good enough, the people are connected with my top line, and I won 80% of the vote, competing against the main political party and the opposition party. Still, I did not believe in partisan politics, and we started a political movement called the People Power Movement. But as time went on, I was pushed to challenge General Museveni first to stay alive because I had become so outspoken that if I was not able to where the eye of the media would focus on me and I would be safe, then I would be in pain. So much later, I ran for president, and here I am. But again, why do I say that I don't want to be representing a particular grouping, even when I lead a political party, the main opposition political party in Uganda? I know that Uganda, like many other countries, is not divided between oppressors and the oppressed, not between ruling party and opposition, no, between oppressors and the oppressed. Why am I saying that? Because there are oppressors, even oppressed people, even within the ruling party. General Museveni's son, who is a military commander, had his birthday yesterday, no, the day before yesterday, and he issued an order that every soldier has to show up and run to celebrate his birthday. He issued an order that every government official must come and celebrate his birthday, even when he himself was not there. And he tweeted, when you check out his Twitter, he questioned why the former military commanders had disrespected him by not showing up for his birthday run. Now, everybody, majority of them had to show up because they're so frightened. Imagine a military official in the government of Kim Jong-un. They are scared to death. So those are oppressed people within the ruling party. And yes, they are oppressed within the so-called opposition. Because we have so many members in the opposition whose major goal is not to put an end to the dictatorship, but to improve their status within the circumstances. So, what I see as desirable is galvanizing the people, regardless of their political party, to, see the truth and follow the truth. Now you ask, how did we then morph from a political movement called People Power to a political party called the National Unity Platform? Now we unveil this political party only 1 month to the election, because our movement could not be registered. There was an instruction by government not to register it as a political party, and yet I was going to run for president, and many people that we associate with were running for various positions of office. We came to an agreement that we cannot just be, sloganeering, and we cannot just be complaining. We chose to sit down and present an alternative. And so we ran for leadership. We got an unknown political party. There are so many political parties that were, registered so many years ago, and they remain on the papers. So we signed it through a proxy that was crafted, but we have to do it. Through a proxy, we changed the system, and we had a delegates conference where the leadership of that party elected me president, and boom, we showed it. The regime could not change anything. There had no alternative. The international community was watching. So they let us run, and that is how we ended up being a political party. Why then do I think that it is necessary for other people in the same circumstances to do the same? Because there must be an alternative. We must criticize what's being done wrong, but also we must offer alternatives. Because when we remove the dictatorships, there shouldn't be vacuums. There should be ready alternatives to spring us to the next level.
Okay, final question. You ran for Parliament in 2017, as you recounted, and you defeated the ruling party candidates, I believe, by 2/3 or more of the vote. And then you endorsed 2 or 3 other people who ran for Parliament against the ruling party candidate, and all of them won. And then I guess the decisive showdown was in August 2018, another parliamentary election in Arua, where Museveni himself went to campaign for the ruling party candidate, and you went to campaign for the opposition party candidate. And he panicked, I recall, and he accused you of inciting people to throw stones at his convoy, and the opposition candidate was arrested. You were arrested, beaten, and tortured, and the opposition candidate still won, even though Museveni had campaigned for his candidate. So I guess that was the decisive point that they started. Partly, you came to the United States for treatment, and many people didn't believe you would go back to Uganda. But not only did you go back, you ran for president in 2021, and you ran again in 2026, even without the threats. Some people might wonder, why? Why did you do that? Is the risk worth it? Explain.
Every risk for freedom is worth it. Because in this life, we either live or we exist. I want to live. And you cannot live when you're not free, when you don't have the right to determine your own destiny. So I went back home because I have to go back home anyway, whether I'm alive or dead. You know, I went back home then because I needed to keep that hope alive. I had run for my life, but still, it wasn't a solution to stay out. So you might ask me if I'm going to go back this time. Yes, I'm only trying to make sure that I make it harder, or at least more costly. Yeah.
So now we go to the best part of this event, which is of course taking your questions from the audience. So let's see, maybe we'll take 5 questions.
5, 6 questions. And if people come up and line up if you have questions, because we only have one mic.
Oh, I'm first then.
Please keep your questions concise.
So let's keep it brief so we can get everybody to
Maybe if we could make the conversation, we ask the question, maybe I get to respond when it's still hot.
First, let me say thank you so much for bringing Bobi Wine. I was so excited when I saw the video last night. I'm from South Africa, and I've been following your work and your struggles and your sacrifices. It's one question, but I'm going to list 11 issues that I think South Africa had that you don't have to waste your struggle in Uganda. South Africa, one, has the clergy, Desmond Tutu, had organized labor, that's number 2, had ANC exile, leaders in exile, with international work. It had the Amstrad, which was in exile as well. It had Nelson Mandela in prison. It had the mass democratic movement inside the country. It had international solidarity, friends against apartheid. Number 7, young white kids started to die in Angola at the Battle of Kutakule Valley, and the whites have started to complain. Number 8, international sanctions, economic, sports, and cultural boycott. Number 9, musicians in exile. We are highlighting the plight of the oppressed black people. Number 10, the civilized and civilians inside the country committed to making the country ungovernable. What do you have? That's why I said I'm struggling. What do you have? Because it looks like the odds are against you.
Thank you very much, my South African brother, Siyabonga. South Africa had all this. He had Mandela in prison, he had controversies where they come doing, it had clergy, it had musicians and leaders in exile, name it. What do we have? We have everything. Then the next question would be, why are you not succeeding yet? I'll tell you, my brother, we have a saying in our Uganda culture that that a person who you used to commit crimes with, or a person who you used to steal with, when they sleep behind your house, you won't sleep. Now, these African dictators are yesteryear's freedom fighters, and they have studied the factors that those that are yearning for freedom, those that are yearning for freedom, get free. And unfortunately, not studied them for the benefit or betterment of their people. They've studied them in order to crush their own people. First, the clergy. We have the clergy. We have the Inter-Religious Council, which is supposed to be the most moral religious body in Uganda. Unfortunately, it has been reduced to a tool of subjugation. Just the other day, the head of the Church of Uganda was on TV telling Uganda, I am not here to serve you. I'm not going to be like, we have a great religious leader, the Archbishop, the person who was occupying the same office in the days of Idi Amin was killed. His name was Archbishop John Nduwum. He was killed by Idi Amin for speaking truth to power. And now the person occupying that office is telling us that if you speak against the government, you will get killed, and I'm not going to speak against the government because I have a family. More or less telling us not to follow Jesus because Jesus was killed for the same reason. Number two, they are musicians. I'm a musician myself. But as we speak now, my music is banned in Uganda. And so many people are in prison for being caught playing my music live. There's a lady we banned her last year. Her name is Marinos. She was caught and raped repeatedly in the military for being found playing my music. And as if that's not enough, there is a budget enough to build 2 hospitals has been given to musicians to sing praises for General 7 because he understands the effect of music, the power of music. He used music in the armed struggle. Now, some Ugandans, of course, have made an effort over the years to start armed struggles. But General 7, its people have spent the last 40 years in power, stockpiling weapons. And we don't want to drive them to an area that they want. They've already named us terrorists. Even when we just terrorize them with the microphone and a guitar. So, we are cautious not to take them where they have strength, violence. That's why we maintain non-violence. I could go on and on and on, but the summary of that is the fact that these dictators have taken time to even get started people. Now, the freedom fighters in Uganda are not the intellectuals. The religious and cultural leaders, the professors, the engineers and all these educated people have been reduced to tools. Now the freedom fighters back home are the barbers, the market vendors. The political prisoners we have now are Olivia Rutaya. The most popular political prisoner, political prisoner is Olivia Rutaya. She's a hawker, an uneducated woman. Ed Mutwe, who is a barber. Machete Yasin, who is an Okada border rider, and all that. It is the common people now fighting for themselves. Because what these liberators of yesterday learned was not to teach the next generation how to free themselves. But they got those skills in order to immunize any other effort to liberate the dictatorships that they knew would come. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. Legacy Ansari, the Department of African Studies from Ghana. So my question, when we were talking, we spoke about how power corrupts. So I have 2 questions. One, in what ways would you ensure that, once you also get into leadership, that power does not corrupt, so those who come after would also not be corrupted. And 2 would be also, in terms of we see people liberated, starting to independence. When it came to time to construct a nation, they had real struggles or real problems as to building a nation. So now, Bobi Wine is now the president. What's next for Uganda? And also, what would be your basically towards South Africa?
Thank you. About being corrupted with power. Yes, that's true. What do I think is going to be the solution to avoid that? I mean, everybody that is looking for power or looking for freedom, as we say, to present ourselves as if looking for freedom and people looking for power. And after getting that power tends to corrupt those leaders. So what is the solution to that? The solution is number one, make sure that we are not looking for a liberty, but we're galvanizing each other to liberate ourselves. We don't need another big man, another big daddy. All we need is that population. And that, we are not going to do it when we get there. We must do it even now. Empower our institutions, or build institutions. Because these institutions will outlive human weakness and human greed. We all know power corrupts. We've seen so many. I've already told you of name after Robert Bobi. He was amazing then, but power corrupted him. I cannot promise you that power won't corrupt me. Therefore, let us make sure that I am not the one liberating us, that we are liberating us. Countries that develop, countries that develop don't look at the leader, they look at the people. Countries like America here, or anywhere in all these democracies, they are not well governed because they have very good leaders. No. They don't stop this corruption because the leaders are so moral. No, you've seen that even here in America, you've seen exchange fires and all that. And I won't go into that business. These countries are well governed because the people are empowered enough not to take any nonsense from the leaders. So we should build an empowered citizenry to hold the leaders accountable, to make sure leaders are servants and not bosses, and to constantly remind those leaders that if they degenerate to what they pretended to fight against, they can and will be kicked the hell out. Leaders must be in a constant state of tension and be reminded that they are servants and they govern in the interest and on behalf of the people. So, let us not look to liberator, let us all be liberators. I believe that is the best way. Finally, you're asking me what I think should be the alternative. Of course, like I said, I'm not here as an unknowing person. I'm here because I want freedom. I want self-determination like anybody else. For us in Uganda, and I believe in many places in Africa, what we want first and foremost is to have a vote. I don't need to be a world-class economist. No. I just need to have a vote and to have the entire population have the power to listen to what is presented to us and what she is presenting to us. And to have the right either to vote for what is presented to us or what she is presenting to us. We want a vote. We want the ability to be able to decide what we want, and that is honor. As simple as that. Thank you.
Mr. Setam, thank you so much for coming. My name is Dennis Mozambique. Born and raised in Jinja. In 2021, when I was among the young people, I was really excited to come back to Uganda for free. And I made it possible to do that time. And actually gathered up my fellow young people to come and vote. You know, we actually went back and forth with our parents. They were like, oh, we need to vote for this person. We're voting for Bobi, and that's what we're doing. We wanted to vote for you. I can actually say counting back because after the election there were so many roadblocks. We were rounding up people, we had people and all that, and we had to pay some people to get those shortcuts out that they have. And finally get it. But I think my concern is there's been so many young people that have been in prison for the sake of liberating Uganda. We've seen in countries around East Africa like Kenya, where political parties have come together to negotiate the way forward. My question and my maybe plea is, would you be open to negotiate if that option was open? Or have you ever thought about that route? How can we move forward as a nation? Because if we have a giant in there that is unshakable, or we try to shake him, but it's coming at a big cost, a lot of people are dying. It's happening. I was in Zimbabwe, I went to school in Zimbabwe. And I saw what dictatorships do. Firsthand, I was there. We've seen the chaos in Kenya, where so many Kenyans are flowing, fled to Uganda because of political unrest. But a lot of political parties, I can't remember the name of the opposition leader at that time in Zimbabwe, young man too. Yes, they are kind of stepped up and God ways to negotiate the way forward. So my youth had friends that have been in prison and have been in prisons. We have young people all over the country. Ginger, where they rounded up some friends, they were released, but they were taken to the why did the story about migration so much? What's the way forward?
Thank you very much, brother from Uganda, and I'm glad you started in Zimbabwe. So you have a grip of both lines. If I heard you well, are we willing to negotiate? Negotiate what?
Yeah.
I mean, everything that we're saying is in black and white. According to our constitution, it's not criminal to run for president. I ran for president. These young people stand up to support me because it is legal and moral. And we were nonviolent. We went out there to campaign. They were rounded up and thrown in prison for years. Some have spent more than 5 years. Others were killed. And yes, the regime in Uganda reached out to those who were in prison and told them that the only way they would leave prison is to accept that they committed a crime and apologize to General Museveni for being hoodwinked and fooled by me into going into opposition politics. Now I fail to understand what crime is there. Of course, many of them were forced to apologize and they were released. Others refused because they don't see any crime they committed. And again, they were being accused of terrorism. So the government told them, for them to be released, they must accept that offense, get out and get out. So for somebody to get a tag permanently on you for being a terrorist, it was unacceptable. Of course, they're kept in prison with no trial whatsoever. They just dumped there. And as of me, to negotiate, in a negotiation for our share, maybe for this. In a negotiation, there's something you give and you take. Me, what I want is to have my comrades released from prison. What should I give? To promise that I will never challenge Museveni again? To promise that I will never talk about the wrong things that are being done? Finally, for us to negotiate, maybe the first thing should be to declare the law useless, because we have laws. I'm convinced that I've not done anything wrong because I've never been arrested or convicted, only harassed. So, for us to negotiate about something wrong, then that would mean dismissing the law. I'm not after power. Power sharing is for people that want power. I just want to be free. And if there's a law, let that not be followed. Because, okay, for me, what if I negotiate and say, okay, I'll have such a position? What about those that are looking at us, that are looking at the truth that we're speaking? Does that mean that all of a sudden what we're saying is wrong? What we are pushing for is to see the rule of law respected in Uganda. It's to see human rights respected in Uganda. It's to see democracy respected in Uganda. So among those three things, democracy, the rule of law, and respect for human rights, what would you want me to negotiate? What would you want us to give up? For us to say, we want them all because they are fundamental and are provided in the Constitution. Thank you.
Let's try to keep it brief because it's really sort of like the rest of the time. So everybody, you have permission behind you.
Hi, nice to meet you, Bobi. I am Jason Isali Kurabu Shigoku. I was born and raised in Tinga, Kampala, and I'm a graduate student.